Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Rational Female Podcast. And we've got the usual panel here today. And our topic was suggested by Blueorange 22. It's on the UK Green Party's alleged policies to make misogyny a hate crime. So, yeah, I have not looked too deeply into this, but I have seen that the UK Green Party. Okay, crap, it looks like I am freezing. That's very bad. Oh dear. So, wait, I'm frozen. Okay, I think there's something wrong with my internet connection today, so I might be freezing a lot. So, if that's the case, then sorry about that.
There you go.
I will let, yeah, okay. I will let Blueorange 22 take the floor with this.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So the Green Party is extremely scary. I've done videos on them recently. They just won a election. Hannah Spencer was just elected as MP. Let me share my screen with you guys and show you. Essentially, the Green Party are very radical feminists. And they are the kinds of feminists that are very hostile to men and boys and very, I don't want to say pro-misandry, but this is Hannah Spencer who just won. Now that I have my screen, one of the things, misogyny, hate crime, men, correct. No, men disagree with women. Essentially, they think that misogyny should encompass a man simply disagreeing with women. And this came out last year, where they were kind of warned by an internal memo. They had a team of, I think, lawyers or barristers review one of their proposals, and they essentially came out and they came back and said, "Listen, the plan you just proposed would mean any disagreement with a woman could lead to a sanction under misogyny." And now there's a conceded effort, there's a growing effort to make misogyny a hate crime. And what's so scary about that is who defines misogyny? Because if they're defining misogyny as any disagreement with women, then a man is not allowed to disagree with a woman, even if she says something that isn't true, or even if she says something that's misandristic. And so what that might lead to, if misogyny is made a hate crime, will he be allowed to criticize feminists? And when it comes to domestic violence, they support the classic feminist model for domestic violence, where of course it's gendered, and definition is gendered. And the bill is written in gendered language, where it's not considered domestic violence, it's considered violence against women and girls. First of all, does that mean that men will be protected less under law or not at all under law? And then secondly, suppose I want to advocate for male victims. Suppose I want to say, listen, I think this law is discriminatory because it excludes male victims. Have I now committed a hate crime? Have I now committed an act of misogyny? Now people will say that's very alarmist and that's a very extreme view. That's a very extreme interpretation. But when you look at their website or their social media, they do come across as very extreme. And I got in touch with the American Green Party on Discord. I couldn't find the UK Green Party. I sent them an email, which they never replied to. And they essentially mocked the idea of misandry. They said that men's rights doesn't exist. And then when I made the case for the gendered law of domestic violence discriminating against men, the response was to say, LOL, and that was it. And then they blocked me. So that's how seriously they take the issue. What would the Green Party's policy be towards boys falling behind in school, for example? The massive gender gap in education, boys getting lower grades, boys getting lower grades for the same work, in fact, men going to college at a much lower rate. What would the Green Party's platform be towards that? What would the Green Party's platform be towards the growing unemployment gap? Men being more likely to be NEETs, not employed, living at home, on benefits, on the streets. I mean, a party that makes a point of not saying domestic violence, but violence against men and boys, makes a point of not talking about human rights, but talking about women's rights. It's just very concerning. And when you look at some of the policies they've done in the past, they want to close women's prisons. They want to codify misogyny. It really makes you wonder, if they took power, which I've been told is very, very unlikely they're going to take power. They're seen as kind of a fringe extreme party, and that's kind of why Hannah Spencer's election was seen as newsworthy. But it does show, if they took power, first of all, how bad would it get? How bad would misandry get? How bad would anti-male laws get? And secondly, the fact that Hannah got elected at all is concerning because it means that kind of radical extreme feminism is growing. I thought we were making inroads. I thought we were finally waking people up to the problem of radical feminism, but this would indicate that it's getting stronger. So,
yes, definitely.
It's worth keeping an eye on, a very, very close eye on.
Well, the two go hand in hand, as you well know, Thomas. With the growth of the men's movement, as more and more male perspectives make it out into the mainstream, or not like the mainstream in terms of like Time magazine, but in terms of the internet, the feminism is increasingly threatened with exposure, and therefore it becomes more ruthless in how it protects itself. So I'd like to say something about. I'd like to address many of those who are out there saying, well, what on earth could possibly be wrong with classes teaching boys not to be misogynist? What could be wrong with, getting these unruly hooligans to respect women? And what's the problem here? Well, the problem basically is that misogyny is presented as something that stands alone. They don't allow for the existence of misandry, but misogyny and misandry stand side by side. When misogyny is presented as something that stands alone, it's a lie of omission. It's a half-truth. And as we know, a half-truth is a whole lie. The only way to present misogyny in a healthy way is to present it side by side with misandry. You take a look at both. Now you're being fair. Now you're being balanced. Now you're being constructive. But when you present misogyny all by itself, then it's pure poison. It's pure poison then. You see, it invites all the women to go all self-righteous and go into a vast victim dictum that the world is against them, that the world is a patriarchy, that women are the powerless victims in all things, which is emotionally and psychologically self-fulfilling. It's all spiritual poison. It invites women to be very self-righteous because all fault is male, because the world is man bad, the over-empowered oppressor, woman good, the innocent victim. And this is just, it's not only does that poison women spiritually, it also, it's a belief system that's guaranteed to maximize intersex rage, resentment, victim vindictiveness, self-righteousness. And look what it's doing in our world. Oh, we've lost our leader there for a moment. Well, I'm sure she'll be back. But anyway, look what it's doing in the world. Look at the divorce rate. Look at how few marriages there are these days. Look at how the vast expansion of single motherhood and fatherlessness and all of this. Every social pathology that concerns us most in the world today can be linked to this destruction of the social fabric, including the diminishment of fathers and fatherhood. And all of this can be traced to these feminist, femalist, one-sided, men have the power, women are the victims belief system. The Green Party obviously embraces wholeheartedly.
Yeah, I definitely heard that. In the UK, they sometimes, like, for whatever you write online, you can get police showing up at your door, and you can actually get quite heavy fines for just online discourse and so on. So it is quite scary, actually, just the idea of policing speech in general, because usually that's seen as something that happens more under dictatorships or whatever. The idea of policing speech is problematic in general because we are policing thought. And even if you don't disagree with someone, everyone needs the space to discuss their opinions, and to find out why you disagree with them. And if I think of myself, at my age, I'm almost 40. When I was young, when I was 18, 19 or whatever, I got onto the internet and I started to discuss with people. At first, I was much more, let's say, radical in my thoughts. I was when I first came into the anti-feminism discussion, I was very, very traditional in my thinking, not in a mean way, but honestly, I hadn't been exposed to different cultures. I hadn't been exposed to the idea of more liberal societies and stuff like this. I just wasn't exposed to it at all in my life. So I came at feminism in a very negative way, in a sense. But the point is that even now I've changed my mind. And it was really important for me to be able to go online and say what I think and argue with people and hear why they think something different and all of that, because that is what helped me to change my mind. That is what helped my thoughts to be what it is today. And I think that everybody needs to do that. So we really do need freedom to think as we want. That's basic, but also to voice those thoughts and to speak about them and to say exactly what we think in order to encounter different views and genuinely change. Because if I lived in a world where I was just in my traditional head and I didn't hear the views of anyone else and I wasn't able to argue with people and say, well, this and this and this is why I believe so and so, then no one would have told me why I was wrong. No one would have, and I would just stay with my, thinking that is not actually accurate. And I think that's really, it's terrible. It creates, it would create a worse environment, I think. It's very complicated, but I do think we need, just as basic human rights, we need the space to speak,
Yeah, so true. That's one thing we have in the U.S. that hasn't yet been taken away, is our Bill of Rights. So.
Yeah, sorry about that. My internet is a bit shaky for some reason, so I just restarted my computer.
We were just talking about the need for freedom of speech, freedom of thought, and so on.
If I can go back to the Green Party, anyone who looks at the UK in 2026 and thinks that we need a feminist-centered approach, when in the UK, men are more likely to be homeless, more likely to be in prison, punished more harshly for crimes. Women can commit grievous bodily harm and avoid prison most of the time, especially if the victim is male. Boys are behind in school significantly. Boys are behind in the workplace significantly. And not only are they saying, no, well, let's focus on the gender that is ahead by virtually almost every economic metric, let's also completely ignore the gender that is not only behind, but is continuing to fall behind at an even faster rate. It gets to the point where you have to wonder, is this ignorance or is this insidious? And that obviously is very concerning in of itself, because if it's ignorance, then there's a chance they may come around, someone may convince them, they may realize, oh, we're doing the wrong thing by shunning the gender that's already falling behind. But if it's insidious, if it's malicious, well, that's much worse, because that means it's not that they're wrong, it's that they're lying. So they can't be convinced, they can't be reasoned with, you can't change their mind. And I just find it impossible to think that you can be involved in politics and be able to look at statistics and be able to interview people on the street and get the perspectives of the common man and woman and still think that there's a problem of female oppression in the UK in 2026.
I think it's actually incredibly insidious. And I think that a lot of it is because, as we all know, there's been decades of feminist indoctrination going on for such a long time. When I talked to Nick Buckley, he's actually, so he's an MP that ran for Advance UK against Hannah Spencer, who won with the Green Party. And, he said firsthand, there is so much indoctrination in politics from feminism, from feminist groups, I mean, the UK played such a prominent role, as we know, in the development of Western feminism. I think what's really sad is that you've probably got these. I don't know the ins and outs of it from a corporate standpoint, but I imagine there are these kind of big organizations that fund. I mean, Erin Pizzey, she was British, wasn't she? You know, there's a lot of money in this, and it's like they just want to push all this propaganda. And the sad thing is that we should be looking at male and female issues from an equal standpoint. It shouldn't be, oh, women are somehow more victim. And what concerns me is that, because I was tweeting about this as well, like, we allow so much nonsense in the social zeitgeist, like saying, for example, the future is female. Why is it somehow controversial to allow people to challenge that? Why is it that some things are allowed and some things are not allowed? It's just bloody 1984. It's wrongthink. It's like certain ideas are allowed, certain ideas are not allowed. So what I don't understand is why, like, I know there's a guy named Mike Buchanan, who ran Justice for Men and Boys, and he ran like a party that was actually campaigning for men's rights. I think we just need some kind of genuine equality, and equality in terms of like equality of opportunity, equality in terms of, you know, both men and women should be treated as equals under the law. Not women should be, you know, we need to look up male victims of domestic violence. I mean, I'm shocked really that the Green Party, because they're not like I mean, they've been around, they're not, you know, a huge party, but they have been around for a while. And I think it's really disturbing how they have so much power. And I mean, I'm not sure how many seats they have in the House of Commons. I think they still just have the one, which is Brighton. Oh, and I guess they have the other one now in Manchester or whatever, but I'm not really sure how it works. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's quite disturbing how they can be allowed, because this is just blatant. I mean, if anything, what they're doing is spreading a hate crime. So, you know, misandry. I mean, if we're saying that misogyny should be a hate crime, well, misandry should be a hate crime in that, by that same logic. If we want a fair, equal society, which we don't really seem to have. So yeah, I think it's very, very disturbing.
So okay, let me address something
on that. The idea, just really fast, what you said about it's wrong think and it's 1984, and there's some things that you can say and some things you can't, some things you can challenge, some things you can't. Who's going to be the ones deciding what can be challenged and what can't, and based on what, and what is their criteria, and are you allowed to challenge that? So am I even allowed to question the notion that you, for some reason, have given yourself the authority to decide what is wrong think and what is not? What gives you in particular that right? And am I even allowed to ask that question?
Well, I think it was Jana that brought up, you know, you usually associate this sort of behavior with a dictatorship. Well, it is a dictatorship, all right? Look, in the realms of gender conflict and complaint, gender activism and advocacy, gender ideology, gender issues, gender studies, gender politics, gender anything, there is feminism on the one hand, and on the other hand, there is nothing. That makes gender politics a one-party system. It means that the feminine alone dictates what is true and what is not true in all matters of gender and every facet of gender. That's an ideological dictatorship. Okay? And that's what we're dealing with, a dictatorship there. And they're not interested in fairness. They're interested in power.
It is, and also it's quite sucky for women too, because in my experience, when you get a lot of women who have these very antagonistic views, because women can be incredibly cliquey. This isn't to say women, I'm not, you know, saying women are terrible at all. I'm just saying that when we have anything, like this is one of the core problems I have with feminism, anything that means, you know, we have a small group of people saying this is what it is, you'll end up with people becoming very cliquey and making it harder for everyone else. And that's why I think we need, you know, a much, much more grounded model in terms of gender dynamics. Because, you know, I mean, Tim, you've said it many times, feminism is an ideological dictatorship. And I saw on Twitter actually again the other day, International Women's Day, apparently it was coined by some leftist in the USSR or Russia. I think that's what it comes from. And Lenin popularized it as International Women's Day. So even the idea of International Women's Day has us rooted in kind of communist thinking, which is quite funny. Yeah, I think international. I mean, I like the idea of International Women's Day, but we should also celebrate International Men's Day.
Well, right.
I mean, personally, I think both days. I don't really. Well, having said that, I don't like all these days anyway. I'm not a fan of any like Mother's Day, Father's Day. I don't really like any
Yeah.
day.
The
But
banks don't need any more
yeah,
excuses to close.
no, selling cards.
So yeah, all right. So the connection, there's quite a connection there. So, if you read the Communist Manifesto, and everywhere that it says bourgeois, you just cross that out and put men there, and every time it talks about the proletariat, you just cross that out and put women there. You got your feminist rhetoric right built in. It's interesting because the Communist Manifesto was published just about a month before the great the New York, with Elizabeth Cady Stanton as keynote speaker, 1848. So I mean, that had a huge influence. That structure, that Marxist manner of thinking, where you've got your sort of us and them, and you've got this victim perpetrator model, and feminism grabbed it and ran with it. And of course the enemy was men, and they're very explicit about it. Have you ever read Elizabeth Cady Stanton's full keynote speech? It's unbelievable. She goes on about how women, there's absolutely no bright spot ever in the history of women. There's all just pure victimhood, and it's all the fault of men.
Yeah, it's terrible. I do have the Communist Manifesto on my shelf, and I remember like reading it and thinking this is basically replacing one tyrannical system with another. That's what they're advocating for eventually. I can't understand, like, it's like, I mean, I know there's some people are religious, but for me, it's like if you read the Bible, you become an atheist. If you actually read it, the way I see it, if you read the Communist Manifesto, that you just see how terribly, ridiculously absurd communism is. There's like a few things they touch on which are okay, but the whole framework of communism, Marxism, is just so ridiculous. And Orwell, he was technically a democratic socialist, but I would say by modern standards, he's probably more of a social democrat. He was very, very against Marxism, Stalinism.
Mhm.
This was just nuts. A lot of kind of left-leaning people, I would describe myself as center-left-leaning, don't support this toxic Marxism or communism or any of this. Somebody mentioned DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, was enforced by Stalin and Lenin. This stuff is just, I mean, the Green Party is true. The modern day Green Party in the UK and doubtlessly the USA, they're just communists. Communism is, I mean, capitalism, yes, capitalism has its flaws, but communism is such an absurd, it's just so ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. And it just doesn't correlate to any kind of sensible governing, which is why it's failed. I mean, it's true. We've never actually seen real communism, but we've seen socialism with a party saying we're the Communist Party, the USSR, China, etc. We haven't actually seen genuine communism because that means, a stateless, moneyless, classless society. Right. No. And it's just, I think it's just antithetical to how humans are built. Like, we're built to compete, we're built to survive, we're built to, have stability, we're built for self-preservation, we're not built for this. And you see it in children, young people, brothers and sisters, from a young age, they're not being, sharing is caring. They're being, I want to one-up you. I want to one-up you. That's just how people are. So it's about
mine. You listen to kids. Mine. It's mine.
But I think on these discussions, there's always a two-sided thing. There is no society that is 100% capitalist or 100% socialist or 100% of either of this, and that's because human nature has both. So usually when people say, oh my gosh, we're built this way, we're supposed to be capitalist, I wouldn't really agree, because I think human nature, yes, we're selfish, but we're also caring. So part
Yeah.
of our nature is to care. So we will always have to blend the two, and you will always have to have a mix of socialism and capitalism to work. So I don't I wouldn't say, I would say when we look at this in terms of ideological things, or if we look at the books written, we look at Communist Manifesto and so on, these are ideological things. In nowhere will any society be 100% like this, or would any society be 100% capitalist. But I can look at the ideology and say, okay, this is very interesting, this makes sense, this is, and I think that's what it's really meant to be. So I always like to stay away from bashing either side or bashing either and say it's total nonsense, because I think there's value in exploring the both sides, and there's value in exploring what are the benefits, what are the negatives, and so on. At least that's my take.
Yeah, that's what I've talked about quite a bit on my channel. That's just what's known as social democracy or social capitalism, which we basically have in the UK, which is very prominent in Scandinavia. It's a capitalist society with social safety nets and a mixed economy. Personally, I think it's a very, I made a video on this and I got a bunch of people saying I was being stupid, because I think that, like, I think capitalism is very good, but I think neoliberal capitalism is terrible. And when people say capitalism is bad, it's like, well, okay, as Jana said, it's not necessarily that. I think capitalism with social, I don't want to say socialistic elements integrated within it is a very good framework, because social democratic states, they flourish well. They're very, progressive in terms of their policies. There's a very high standard of living. I don't really find any fault with, welfare capitalism, social capitalism. And I don't know. I don't really, yeah.
But when it comes to like communism, you would say, okay, I know some people argue for, okay, we need capitalism at a normal level when people don't have a lot of money to motivate people, so that you have what you work, you get whatever. It's a sense of direct feedback and motivation. But then I know that a lot of people today argue, okay, the absolute billionaires of the world, maybe they are too wealthy, and we're not saying to take away all their wealth. Well, maybe we are saying. So maybe at a certain point, if you create a company that is worth so much, then the government can step in and take huge portions of that company and say, okay, this company is now, let's say, 90% owned by the government. Because
why?
Well, so to make sure, I suppose the why would be so that those who are very, very wealthy do not have absolute power to affect society in negative ways, because there's always the risk that if the money is left with them, they can use that capital and that money to then influence society, to buy politicians, to influence our media, to influence the entire system. And so there is the argument where people say, okay, yes, if you become very, very rich, at that point, your company becomes more communist in that the government takes a huge portion of it, or the regulation of that company becomes so, yeah, basically the government will take.
But then you're just giving it to the government. So why aren't you just transferring that power from the business to the government?
Yes, but that power is then in the hands, it's spread. I mean, when you think of absolute power, for example, we could see like in America right now how everybody's complaining about Donald Trump and so on and so on. Absolute power in the hands of one is much worse than absolute power in the hands of many. So the idea is to spread the power so that you have a diverse input. They have different input rather than just one. Because if that one person turns out to be a psycho, then you're in trouble.
Yeah, but you want to take the power from a small group of people and give it to another small group of people, i.e. the government.
Yeah, but not as small. The government
is still the same thing, though. It's just a transfer of power from one thing to the other.
It's not. It's definitely not the same thing, because it's not the same thing. The size of the people is bigger. The interest of the people would be different.
But I'm saying the government, not the actual people.
Yes, but if you argue, okay, if you look at something like what you would say is communist China, you would say that the government is a small group of people.
Well, yeah, it's a bureaucracy. It's just a bureaucracy. It's
not necessarily a small group of people. It's not as small as if you leave it in the power of those who, the comparison between size is very different when you say if you leave it in the power of just billionaires.
The point is, in practice, it's the same thing. You've got corporatism, or communism. In practice, you've got just a small group of people. You've either got a corporation or you've got a bureaucracy. That I'm just saying that
Right.
based
Okay.
on like
But the
based on
choice for the
historically.
bureaucracy, yeah. But then it's a choice. It's still a choice, right? Would you say is one really better than the other? What is the argument for? There's still this choice to make, right? And the choice for the government is usually because you're saying that power is being spread over a group of people from who live here, there, from a more diverse background. And therefore, the chances of that power being used negatively against the people is reduced.
Well, not really, because we're talking about the Green Party, aren't we? Let's say the Green Party gone into power, right, as a party. They would not have the interests of the people at heart because they just be prioritizing the interests of what their party sees fit, which is why democracy is so important. Because if we just have one party, they're just going to prioritize the interests of what their party believes is right. And these kind of far radical leftist parties, that say we're all about fairness and equality and whatever, but they're not, are they? Because as, Blueorange said earlier, they want to bring these policies, which are basically just promoting misandry. So it's the danger, and this is a big problem I have with kind of radical left-wing doctrines. It's that there's a criticism of neoliberalism and conservatism, which I agree with. I'm not right-wing at all. However, it's this thing of going from that to that. And I just think, the center leading ground gives people a bit more freedom. It actually gives more freedom to people, like having some things under government control, like, for example, healthcare and welfare and education, and then allowing people to have private companies and, governments stay out of the business, essentially. I don't know.
Well, I think go back to the motivation. What's behind like the Green Party? What's behind feminism? Why are they being so ruthless? Why are they being so dictatorial? And in part, I think they actually believe their own indoctrination. I think we underestimate the degree to which they believe their own shtick. They believe that men have the power and women are the victims. They believe that there is that the white male is the over-empowered oppressor, and that women are the innocent victims. They believe that, and I think one of the motivator is a genuine ideological obsession with that way of looking. If you believe that in men have the power, women are the victims, you will want to take power and punish man bad, the over-empowered oppressor. Of course you will. And if you actually believe that women are, the innocent victims, well, of course you're going to want to reward, extra protect, and advantage the innocent victims. Because it's not right for one faction of humanity to be granted the power while another faction of humanity is targeted as the victims. That's wrong, and we would see that wrong corrected by countermeasures, and that's feminism. Feminism presents as a righteous corrective, a necessary corrective, and I think we don't totally underestimate the degree to which these people believe what they're saying and the rightness of what they're doing. And if they were ever exposed, I don't think the magnitude of the judgment that could come crashing down on feminism and feminists is staggering.
How do you expose them?
You expose them by presenting the other half of gender reality. You expose them by showing that their half of gender reality is nothing more than half, that from the beginning, they've been trying to shove men have the power, women are the victims, that half of gender reality down our throats as if it were gender reality in its entirety. And in the process, the damage they have done to gender relations, to the social fabric, the dreadful defamation of male character, just the wedge that's been driven between the sexes, the sheer hate pathology that they're guilty of infusing into the world. If they were truly exposed, if they truly, if it were like open season and anybody could get up there and start talking about how the early suffragettes were basically terrorists,
Yeah.
that only because they were incompetent are they not really known to be terrorists. If they'd succeeded in what they were trying to do, they would have killed very large numbers of people, and with dreadful destruction of landmark buildings and so on. I mean, they're just dreadful. What the, if you could critique all of this stuff in an open way, wow. I mean, what could potentially come crashing down on this whole feminist belief system and feminists themselves, and by extension, even women. It could spread to women. You see these judgments, so they're running scared in a sense. We don't see it that way because they seem so all powerful, and they are all powerful, and yet they are incredibly vulnerable because it's all based on a lie of omission. It's all based on a lie. So this whole thing with feminism is like a house of cards, and if the tipping point came, and people just no longer believe that men have the power, women are the victims, and therefore they no longer believe that feminism is a righteous corrective, they could just become open to massive critique and denigration, and they deserve it. They've really perpetrated a hoax, and so I think partially why they're so ruthless, why they're doing this, why they're going to such lengths to protect themselves, is because they're running scared. And if they're not, they ought to be, because the potential is there to not just sort of put an end to their ideological dictatorship, but also to just lay waste to them.
Zarina, I want to ask you something. You're the only one actually living in the UK. What, if anything, are you hearing people at Sainsbury's, at the bus stop, at work, saying about the Green Party? Is it being talked about much? Is it in like the tabloids very much? Is it being talked about?
I'm not the best person to ask questions like that because I'm not really that much around people in the normal sense. I mainly get my information from the internet. But I will say, because I'm in some kind of other groups, I've seen a lot of stuff online about this, and I'm not really sure how to answer those kind of questions because, yeah, I mean, I will say though that I think I've said this before, like Keir Starmer, he is, the most disliked politician that we've had in a while. Yeah, I've just seen mainly stuff online, really. So I don't know. I wouldn't know how to answer that question.
Good stuff, bad stuff, positive, negative.
Well, let's see. So I do know somebody who is a very avid Green Party supporter. This person is someone who basically would say the Green Party, like I have heard actually in the past, people who support the green stuff, they'll say they're the most kind of rational party. They've got the best kind of, the best policies, the best interests of people at heart. I mean, I can talk about the guy I did the stream with because the MP Nick Buckley. He basically says the Green Party are insane, but
you should have the guy you just mentioned, who is the big Green Party supporter. You should have him on your show.
Oh God, no! He's a very, very condescending person. This is not someone I would want to do a channel. We have far too many disagreements. I've known him for a very long time. I don't talk about people I know that much. But anyway, yeah, I think that I am in this politics group, but that's also online. We talk, a lot of the people in that group are in the UK. I haven't heard anyone necessarily say they're pro Green Party or not. Quite a few people are pro Labour. Like I personally, for example, I myself was always kind of very pro Labour because Labour were kind of the party that pro, the working class, and I myself am, upper working class, to be very technically correct. Labour, they're kind of pro, things like NHS, pro multiculturalism, but I don't like modern Labour for these kind of reasons. One of them being, for example, I think they're very pro-Islamism, and they're very pro, this whole thing of wanting to make misogyny a hate crime. A party that I do like the look of is the Social Democratic Party, the SDP. So they're quite a nice party that I found online. They're very progressive leaning, but they're kind of anti-woke left leaning party. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, in terms of my own life, it's hard to say really, because my own life is not actually, I don't have to discuss that, but yeah, I don't know. So somebody said the Green Party in London is viewed as very left-leaning because Keir's handlers will need another party to push. The problem also with London is that, like, for example, I guess a good example I could actually use is dating. So a lot of people on dating apps, a lot of people are very kind of, left-leaning. They have these very pro-woke. A lot of men will say, like, left or feminist, and even women, like if you go to places and you meet women and have female friends, a lot of people do have these kind of views. So that can be a bit exhausting. I try to be, I'm very wary of people that I don't know too well now for very, very personal reasons. But I don't know. I think that it's tough because everyone is been so obsessed and consumed by all of this. I'm a victim and I'm oppressed, and this woke, this mentality that's been going on for the last, I don't know, it's been really, really bad. I say probably since before Trump came into power. But yeah, I don't know. I think the Green Party, I hope, I have seen that a lot of people now are turning towards Restore, which are the kind of right-leaning version of the main parties. Restore are kind of more right of Reform, because Reform had a lot of support, and now more people are turning to Restore. And Rupert Lowe, he's got a lot of popularity. I saw Carl Benjamin from the Lotus Eaters, he was doing an interview with Rupert Lowe. But yeah, I don't support the right. I mean, apart from Islam, which I really don't like at all, I don't have much to say in terms of being favorable with the right. I'm not someone who really supports the right. I don't support any right-leaning parties. I'm really not very right-wing. So, and that's a big kind of concern, cause of contention for me, because I've been called right-wing by people, including by the fellow who I mentioned earlier, who is a friend of mine. I got people saying I'm right-wing for my views. I can't stand it. So yeah, it's
me too. But
yeah.
I find the only parties, the only mainstream parties that take on an even half-hearted attempts at genuinely caring about men's rights or men's issues, and they don't really care, and very often they come at it with the wrong approach, but at least they make the effort to say something, do tend to be right-wing parties. And it seems like the men's movement has been sort of pushed, and anti-feminism has been sort of pushed to the right because of how embedded feminism and toxic feminism is with the left. So feminism and the left do have a direct alliance. And so that kind of puts, in the same way the Soviets and the USA were never really friends, they were allies. And there's a difference. And I'm not saying that and I'm not saying that they're allies, conservatives are allies of the men's movement at all, but we have a common opponent. Or the same people attacked both of us. We're attacked by the same side simultaneously.
Yeah.
Yeah, World War II, you mean, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because the Soviets and the Americans obviously ended up becoming, clashing during the Cold War, but they were both fighting a common enemy, which was the Nazis during the Second World War. So somebody just said, I was pro-labor until the lockdown. Red flags, the pushing trans mutilation of kids, LGBT in school, the two-tier justice system, any government not up for grape ganging. Yeah, this is the problem, isn't it? Like, a lot of people, I think that a lot of this stuff that Labour and the left are kind of doing now. For me, it's this Islamification, which otherwise I don't have a massive problem with multiculturalism, but the Islamification thing and also this pushing of radical gender ideology, I think this is why a lot of people who did support Labour or the kind of the left in this country are now turning away from them. It's just exhausting. I feel like I'm the only person who still says LGBT, by the way. I made a funny tweet about that earlier. Like, a lot of people say LGBTQ or LGBTQIA. I still say LGBT. I can't be bothered to give the other. I think it's really ridiculous. I'm not going to say. I literally, in my videos, like the ones I make, my normal videos, I refuse to give all the letters. I just say LGBT. Yeah.
I say Q because I've heard it so many times, it's kind of ingrained in my brain. I mean, if you live in Los Angeles, you hear it every single day because it's on every single banner, every single billboard, every single business you go into. So, and I have nothing against it. It doesn't bother me really. It's whatever.
Well, my judgment is I have nothing against trans people, and I think that trans activism has much to answer for. I think there's a lot of shadow behind it.
Oh, unquestionably, a lot of shadow behind it.
Yeah.
A lot of shadow behind it. It's any issue that is divisive or that causes people to turn against each other. You can be quite sure the Chinese and or the Russians are putting money behind it.
Well, I'll make a further little point about, I don't think it really landed. I just want to say that this is, what we're seeing here is the basic pattern of any dictatorship. It's like at first the dictator is secure, has got all the power. And then he begins to see his dictatorship crumble. Signs that the dictatorship is not holding. And all of a sudden he becomes vulnerable to the possibility of being held accountable for all the atrocities. And then he becomes paranoid. And then I think this is what we're seeing in this feminist elite. This is what they're paranoid, and for good reason. They're close to being exposed.
Well, it's happening already, because while I did say in the beginning, this is a worrying sign that they're getting more powerful, the pushback, I think, is growing as well. The men's rights movement and anti-feminism is growing more as well. And just like
that's right, exactly what I mean.
Yeah.
I remember I was gonna say something because Tim mentioned earlier something about how if there was such a much broader conversation against this mainstream, woke feminist narrative, that'd be good. This is why I think YouTube and the internet is so fantastic, because if it wasn't for YouTube, the internet, like, we wouldn't be having this conversation. And I think that we're so lucky to live in this age now where we have the internet, because people can actually start to speak out against, like, a lot of people on YouTube now. I see so many, not enough actually, but there are channels out there who are speaking out against this stuff. And that to me is like actual power to the people. And I think that, that's where, like, the idea of democracy, of freedom of speech, those classical liberal values that are very good, that's where it really comes into play. People having the right to speak up. Like in China, for instance, if anyone says anything against the government, you're in trouble because of their social credit system or social contract. I think it's social credit system, whatever it's called. So, yeah, I think that, having these spaces where people, and I personally, like, I try and listen to people of different views, like people on the right, in terms of watching, different YouTubers or whatever, because it keeps you informed. And I don't know, I think it's like very, very good that we have this. So I hope that this is gonna, like, this is kind of the start of a kind of intellectual revolution in terms of where people are able to think outside the box, and this generation of new ideas, because so many people are really fed up of all this neo-progressivism and anti-male, anti-white, all this stuff is just so draining and exhausting now. you know, it's getting really exhausting. And I mean, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So let me tell you something that's kind of interesting on my Gender Equalist site. I put out a meme. There was this feminist named Firestone, and she put out a pretty influential book, anti-marriage, anti-family. And, you know, she's one of many, many, you know. Simone de Beauvoir, of course, famously said that no woman should have the choice to stay home with her children, because if they had that choice, too many women would make that.
Yeah, it was quite, yeah.
Yeah, she didn't seem to get her own irony there. But this woman, so she stood very much against the family, which she regarded as a hotbed of patriarchal oppression. And then the irony is with her is she died a while back at age 67, and she had starved to death. She was all alone, totally isolated, and no one knew she was dead until like a week later or something, when the smell, you know.
Wow.
So she had no family. So you can see the irony there, right? I mean, she hated and sought to destroy the very institution, marriage, which, if she had embraced it, would have almost certainly safeguarded her from that dreadful fate. So, couple things. A lot of people, of course, agreed with that post, and I got a huge number of likes, and it's up, I think, over 1,000 comments now, and so it really, you know, pushed people's buttons. But I'm astonished at the number of women that have said, well, you know, she lived longer than she would have if she'd gotten married. Her husband would have killed her before 67.
Wow, that's disturbing.
And you see, Thomas, they seem to actually believe that.
That's very, very disturbing.
Which is astounding, but they seem to believe their own
some of them
indoctrination, because they actually seem to think that husbands are just killing wives en masse.
But some of them, I think, are genuine sociopaths.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's true. I'm sure there's a percentage that are just they're just living out of their own woundedness. They're living out of their own really dark, hostile, angry, embittered evil, if you want to just put a people.
It's very sad. My dad, because we have these conversations a lot. He and my brother. I posted something funny actually on International Women's Day on Sunday, because my dad and brother came over, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I cooked my dad and brother dinner for International Women's Day." I'm just making an off-color joke. Sometimes I wonder if people actually get that I'm being a slightly sarcastic when I say things online. But anyway,
oh my God, people don't get that. They do not.
No,
it's amazing. No matter how thick the sarcasm is, there's going to be a faction out there that will think you're being completely serious about it.
Yeah, I'm not saying that all women have to be cooking and cleaning. I'm making a joke that I'm cooking for the two men that I love very dearly. Anyway, so my dad was saying that, you know, a lot of women now, they're going to end up alone. They're going to end up, you know, completely. It's such a big breakdown of society. I mean, I think it's very, very sad. I think that, you know, I mean, it's different if a woman genuinely doesn't want to be in a relationship, doesn't want children. I think that's perfectly fine too. Like, that's not the same thing at all if it's by choice. But for women who generally, or people in generally, who want to have a partner, who want to have a family, and it's getting to a point where a lot of people now, they reach their 30s or their 40s, they just can't make it happen. I think that, you know, this is what the Green Party, because fundamentally speaking, I would really say at my core of my view regarding feminism, it's really just about dividing the sexes. It's just about turning men and women against each other, to say that, you know, to turn what was once a very, you know, evolutionarily necessary relationship, and quite a positive one on the whole, into a bloody war zone. So it's just horrible, an ideological war zone. And, you know, as mentioned earlier, people like Elizabeth Cady Stanton and even, Marx, Engels with the origin of the family, private property, estate, all this stuff. It's really just about tearing people apart. I wonder why. I think a lot of it is to do with narcissism, because, there are people who ruin people for no reason that I am very, very familiar with. And I think that, there are people who just want to ruin people's lives for no reason because they just get a sick kick out of it, because some people are just sick in the head.
And they may be born that way.
Like,
See, I do all this facilitation of men's work.
Yeah.
And I do this carpet work and a process called life review. And I get the deepest secrets, the deepest, darkest stuff that these men have endured. Women also on the women's weekends. But it's horrific what so many people have gone through. And really, I mean, just staggering what some of these people have endured in their childhood. But these people that come through Path to Spirit, though, it's almost always made them all the more gentle, empathic, sweet, kind, exactly because they know pain. They know pain so well, and they empathize. So when we hear about some freak like John Wayne Gacy or something, I don't know, whatever, Jeffrey Dahmer or whatever, yes, they were abused. They were horribly abused in their childhood. But something caused them, something that they lacked, something that caused them to go down the path of pure hate, violence, destruction, and some of those people ended up in the early formation of feminism, and they're still there. A
lot of feminists were prominently abused, weren't they? Like Dworkin and I'm just laughing at one of the comments.
This Firestone, Dworkin was certainly.
Well, somebody said it's horrific what some of these people have gone through. Zarina laughed. I'm laughing because I have gone through hell myself. That's why I'm laughing. I go to Alcoholics Anonymous 12-step meetings, so I'm very well versed in what people go through. But yeah, to bring it back to feminism, it's a lot of these feminists, they were abused. And if you've been abused or if you've been through serious trauma, I really don't think that so many people go through hell, so many serious hell, like, especially when I'm sure Path to Spirit is a bit like, the similarity between that and 12-step programs in the sense that there's a lot of people, going through serious, hell.
That's right.
And, it's not an excuse to start treating other people badly. It's like if somebody is abused, they abuse somebody else. I've experienced that. It's very bad. It's very sick. So, I don't know. I think that really ultimately comes down to it. Oh, you know what? I'm trying to think now. I think it was actually in the flip side of feminism. Suzanne Venker, she makes a very good point because she's talking about how Betty Friedan and Gloria Steinem, how they were raised in very dysfunctional families. And she says, it's obviously sad what these women have gone through, but that's not an excuse to inflict that sense of, oh, my life is terrible onto everyone else and start saying all women are abused by men. All women are mistreated. Yes. It's very, very sick.
It's very sick. If you're going to seek a voice, if you're going to seek to be an influencer and have an impact out there, if you were abused badly, it's incumbent upon you to do your personal work, to you have to, everybody has a story. Everybody's life is a story. Every child's life is a story, and everyone has to decide, am I my story, or is my story just what happened to me? You see? So these people, they decide their story is who they are, rather than choose to go with a life of their own choosing. They went with just the patterns that were drilled into them from infancy. And actually, if they did their work, if they found a good place to do their work, it's possible to, I think, maybe heal from most anything. But but they didn't do that work. This woman that I just told you about that was so anti-family, she didn't do her work.
Yeah.
She just succumbed to the dark side of the world, human nature, and because that was her story, the abuse. She could not make the distinction between herself and her story, and so she just became her story, and lived out of the rage and hate of that story. And
yeah, well, that's a good way to bring us to the end of this stream. Thank you everyone for watching, tuning in. Should be live streaming again next week. Yeah, you'll see it on the tab. But yeah, some very, very interesting stuff discussed here today. Some really seriously important stuff. Anyway, thank you everyone. This is The Rational Female, and we will be live again very soon in the coming next week. Bye-bye.